Hello, and welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. Each episode, we talk about a particular topic in the life of a professor. We are tenure-track faculty members in the sciences, working at a primarily undergraduate university in California. The purpose of our podcast is reflection, so we bring something we think is working and something we're working on to discuss. Welcome to the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. I'm Claire.
And I'm Ruth. And today we're going to talk about clubs. But before we do that, Claire, how was your week?
My week was good. I wanted to report back. Ralph and I released our music EP, and it was fun. We got a great response. We got a cool review in Alternative Music Blog, and it was just really awesome. Okay, yeah, I will. So it was really fun to just have it be out there and start to get feedback on it. And people are like, "This is my favorite song," and that kind of thing. So that was lovely.
Yeah, it's so strange to me to hear stuff like it's so great and so professional sounding, and just like it's sort of weird that like normal human people can do that in their home. Do you know what I mean? Like it's, yeah. I mean, I knew it was going to be really high quality and awesome, but it was just, yeah. It's strange to think that it didn't have $1 million behind it and in a studio somewhere. So
that is all Ralph building up a nice studio in our house.
Well, perfect. It sounds fantastic.
How was your week?
My week was really good. I'm trying to talk about this in a way, but like I'm on a search committee and it's been so interesting. And obviously, you know, I'm like trying to remember which aspects are just no go to talk about. But one of the things that's been really funny about it has been it's all these people that I didn't know before from different parts of our college, and often like the candidates would ask us questions, and hearing other people's responses have been so fascinating.
How interesting.
Right, and like borderline, you want to be like, candidate, could you be quiet? I want to hear what's happening. Like, it's just like hearing about all of the things that are going on in the college. Actually, can I do my quote as part of this?
Yeah, go.
Okay, so my quote is, I couldn't find a source for the quote, but it's the old, you can't make money without spending money. Like you need to spend money to make money.
Classic.
And I think I've been thinking about that a lot in the sort of lens of hearing all these conversations and hearing about the cool things people do, and thinking about, I think like most universities in America / the world, we're all undergoing sort of budgetary issues. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking about just what a shame it is sometimes when certain things fall by the wayside a little bit. Mm-hmm. Like we have a piece of equipment on campus that's a scanning electron microscope, and the person who was in charge of sort of who got to go there and use it has retired, and nobody has gotten units to sort of take over that position. So it's just not being used.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like, so things like that, and like, or did you know that there's like this pot of money over here that you can go to if you want experimental equipment, and no, you don't, because everybody's flat out. You know, so I think I was just thinking about how maybe smaller expenses in terms of personnel and stuff could have such a huge impact, you know, both on like our experiences and also student learning and potentially research money coming in. So I think it was very inspiring to see so many cool things that people do. And then I'm like, I wish I could hear more about all the cool things people do. So
that's awesome. I mean, it's cool to hear more about. I mean, it does seem like sometimes we forget the people that we aren't interacting with are also doing awesome things. And it's really nice to hear some bits about that. I remember hearing a bit from one of the candidates saying something about money following good ideas. And I love that concept of if you come up with some good ideas and then, you know, put it in the right places, and I think it will be possible to move forward with these awesome ideas. So anyway, I love it.
Right. And I think what people can actually do with kind of limited resources is actually amazing. But just like, what could you do if there was a little bit more? So, yeah. And it made me very, you know, a big sort of draw about our university is all of the fieldwork aspect of things. And it's not something I have any experience of whatsoever. And so hearing about that was really cool, and just like how meaningful it is for students. And it's just cool. It's just really, really cool. So I think that was kind of, the search committee has been like a lot, but also super interesting.
That sounds really cool. And how I wouldn't have expected, but it makes perfect sense in retrospect that you're learning more about our university by being on the search committee.
Like sometimes I was like taking notes like about the candidate, but also like, oh, did I know this about like where we are? And so yeah, it was definitely pretty cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Okay, so today we're talking about clubs.
Yes, and I'm super excited to hear your thoughts on it because you've led so many cool clubs, and I want to hear.
As usual, I have a downer note about it, but yes,
well, of course.
Yeah. Well,
we'd expect nothing less, Ruth.
Yeah. So, will I go first? Is that
yes? Please
okay.
Go first.
I think so. I've written down here. Clubs are awesome, and I'm really blown away by clubs and what they can mean for students. Mm-hmm. And like one thing I would hold up as being a very positive, well-run club is the chemistry club that you guys have. It's like just seems like it's just really consistent and awesome. And they have an award ceremony they were having the other night called the Acetonies, and I think that's quite hilarious. And they, have all of this stuff. So I think that's great. And like students are amazing. Like there is actually a student on the search committee that we did, and they were just so amazing and so hardworking and doing like putting so much energy into things. And like there's a lot of cool clubs on campus. Like one thing I went to was a Day of the Dead celebration a few years ago, and just seeing how invested and hardworking the students were of like pulling that off was like phenomenal. But for me, I've sort of like run some clubs on campus, so I have two kind of club event things. So one is the Paranormal Physics Society, which is awesome. I love it so much. So in that, like the official sort of blurb is that we're talking about science when there is no right answer, or like maybe like how would you design an experiment to prove someone was psychic? And you don't have to be a believer to come to the meetings. And I have really enjoyed seeing how creative students are if there isn't a right answer, like if they don't, if they're not worried about being wrong.
Oh, cool. That's awesome.
Yeah. So it's super cool. And we have an amazing technician in our department who is also big into the paranormal. And he designed like an EMF detector, and the students got the parts and built it and did soldering and all sorts of circuit business.
Wow. To test for ghosts or something?
Yeah, yeah, totally. So to test like if you were in a haunted area, is there some difference? And so that's partly because, so there is this, okay, so just a bit of a longer story, but there is a story about a haunted lab that was like very haunted, and people were always seeing things there.
In our building?
Not in our building, but it has some stories about our building too, but this is like more of a national thing, or somewhere else in the country. And one day, the guy who was running the lab, who had seen things, was cleaning his foil. You know those swords you use in fencing? Oh, yeah. Which is such an academic person in a lab would totally be cleaning their foil late at night. But anyway, like he had it in a clamp and he could see it oscillating. Oh. So the whole long story is that there was a giant fan that was oscillating at a threshold of like a frequency lower than we can hear. Ooh. But it's called infrasound, and it can make people have weird feelings, and and it can also like oscillate your eyeballs, like it creates like this resonance, so you can see like shadows and things. Wow. Anyway, so the long story was it probably wasn't haunted, and it was this physiological response potentially. Anyway, it was just super cool. That's so cool. And so some of the things is like, could you have an EMF signal that could signal that people were like actually experience a physical response to this signal, and that makes them think there's stuff, or are the ghosts using that energy to come here, whatever. So like
totally
it's super fun. And I definitely I've had like, I like a good conspiracy theory, but then I feel like concerned about that identity now, because that's taken on a whole other bag of like, my conspiracy theories are like Roswell or who shot JFK, or the old, not necessarily some of the more concerning ones there are now. So I think, so that's been a bit of a thing. And it's good though, we talk about those things. And so that has been good. It has not translated into post-COVID. Like you haven't
done some virtual version of the paranormal physics thing.
It was so good, and we would have cookies. And so the other club that we have is Crafternoon, which is doing crafts and
in the afternoon.
Exactly. And it started through the Society for Women in Math and Science. And we started doing it kind of I read a really cool article about someone talking about why they teach math through knitting and how, and like part of the quote was, it was like, we can't just keep putting ribbons on robots and expecting girls to get interested. And that really resonated with me because I think I've confessed on here that I don't really care about technology, but I do really like physics. And there is a lot of patterns. Like, I think early computer programming was based on knitting patterns because there's a lot of like repetitive loops, like
interesting,
continue this pattern of increasing the row by 2 stitches every 4th row. And like, there's times like I've been literally sweating trying to follow a knitting pattern and like understand, like turning the heel of a sock takes all of my mental powers to do.
I believe it.
Yeah. And so like we would, at first I had an agenda about like talking about the patriarchy and how whatever, but it ended up just being people crafting and eating chocolate. So that works too. But there is sort of a little bit of an undercurrent of like, why is it math to build a bridge, but it's the same kind of math maybe to make a dress, but it's not considered, you know, as important because it's lady work. And that has been just genuinely magical at times. Like it was so good. And so many students, I had a student who taught me how to make this laptop case that we made.
Cool.
And it was like just so cool. And like students really sharing things they learned from their parents. And like one girl who was very shy, but she led like a whole group in how to make these origami bunnies. And
no way.
So it was super lovely. And some people would just come and do homework and sort of soak up the atmosphere. But we got like a sewing machine, and
wow,
we got a set of drawers that's full of like all this donated yarn. And I've taught a lot of students how to knit. And one student emailed me from his REU and told me that he was teaching
everyone how to knit.
And I was like, it was like, oh my God, that's like my grandchildren then, because I taught you how to knit. So that was super lovely. So
that's so nice.
Yeah, those have been phenomenal, and something that like I often feel grumpy, like, oh, I have to go do this thing, and then when I do it, it's just like, oh, that was so lovely and refreshing and fantastic. So
totally,
I think it's super. I think clubs are wonderful, and I'll get to my grumpy bits about it.
Okay.
But tell me about yours. What were you
Well,
gonna say?
I just wanted to say that I've come to a couple crafternoons and just was so impressed with the relaxed, congenial atmosphere. You know, like, it's just so nice to see everybody getting along in a relaxed, you know, like we're doing this fun thing together that's totally optional and just for us to enjoy. Because so often we see, you know, people working together, but they're stressed about this problem that they have to have done by the next day or whatever. So just to have a space where I think you really successfully made it relaxing and supportive. And so I think that's a really cool thing that clubs can do, is create a gathering space with these people who do spend a lot of time together in classes, but then they can be focusing on something that they're not going to get a grade on, and there's not a right answer or something like that. That's awesome.
Sorry, I'm like talking over your thing, but I think there's so much power. I really believe in the power of crafts, but I think there's a lot of power in sort of shared enterprise or something. Like I remember hearing, so after I think the last recession in Ireland, there was a lot of male suicide. Sorry, that's very grim, but it was a real problem because that was who were hit most by the job market, because it was in construction. But they were trying to sort of do groupings for men, and it was like, get together and talk about your feelings, and it was just not happening. But there was someone, I read an article about someone had a thing called men's sheds, and it was like men getting together to work on an old motorbike, or men getting together to refurbish. And in that situation, people really did blossom and were able to talk.
Right.
Because it's not just people staring at each other. And I've been to a lot of like knitting groups, and it's so great because if you're not in the mood to chat, you just sit and knit, but you can also chime in if you want to. But because you're there to do the knitting, like you don't have to necessarily.
Yeah. It's not all about this conversation we're going to have, and then the conversation can kind of bloom.
Right. And if you're like, your conversation could be, can you show me how to knit these 2 stitches together? Or it can be, I'm so stressed about this exam. Like it doesn't. So I think that's helpful. Like it's not really the intense focus of let's all talk about our feelings.
Yeah. Totally. And also, I just wanted to add with the paranormal physics, I love the idea that we could maybe track paranormal activity with electromagnetic field variations. But then the question is it some random electromagnetic field that's causing our perceptions to think that there's ghosts? Or is it the actual ghosts are causing or using the That's so cool.
I love it. So. Like these students, we've got some haunted dorms. And one student went and the other student like filmed her. And it was, I thought I was going to pass out. Like it was so funny and adorable and wonderful. But they were really like, okay, we got a spike in signal, but the next thing we need to do is make a database of like, what is the signal that comes from the Wi-Fi and what is like to have that for comparison. And they were like, just like so smart talking about experiment design, because I'm just very like, oh, it's a ghost, like I believe anything. So they were like, well, hang on, what if it's this and this? And so
how are we going to test this though?
Right. And I'm like, no, let's not test it, let's just believe it. And so it's
That's
super
awesome.
fun.
I think this also ties into having projects in your class and like enough time to like really develop them and come up with something. And of course that's a little different because you have a grade and you have deadlines and all this, and they're doing this with their own motivation and enthusiasm. But anyway, I love it.
Super. We went, there is a local ghost tour here. And we went around Halloween and it was so cool.
As the club.
Yeah, it was super fun. Like, I mean, it's just fascinating and interesting. And I have not felt as connected to where we live as hearing all of these stories. And it was just super fascinating.
That sounds really cool. I mean, what a cool clip. I think that's so awesome that you're running those.
We love it. Yeah. We also have a conspiracy board that the students made with like, we tried to have red yarn, like connecting all of the things.
Oh, cool.
But it got too out of control too fast, but it was definitely fun. So yeah, I'm a big believer in paranormal, bringing people together. So who knew?
Through paranormal, yeah.
Yeah.
So I haven't really been involved in clubs as a faculty member, but I wanted to share some of the awesome things that our chemistry club has been doing.
Yeah.
So they're super active, really regular. We have a couple faculty members who are really, one in particular who are really dedicated to, having regular meetings. And then the club president is usually really good about, the club president, of course, varies year to year, but then they have regular meetings and they schedule activities. And they've really, even this year when it's been all virtual, they've come up with cool things. The students are incredibly creative. And I think this they really came up with some awesome things. So they've been doing virtual game nights and just, having social interactions on their regular Wednesday night meetings. They've been having speakers come, both recent graduates who would talk about what they've been doing.
Oh, wow.
And then also themselves would research some topic of interest and tell everyone about it. And they host events like how to apply to RUs or that kind of thing. And back when it wasn't virtual, they were doing things like making red cabbage pH indicators. Do you know about this? You can boil red cabbage and then take the juice that you get, and then that's a pH indicator where it'll change colors based on what pH the solution is. So I think they did that for some, to show some local elementary school students about pH.
Are you going to tell us the awesome name of the chemistry club?
It's called the Free Radicals.
I love it.
Which is a fun joke because free radicals are free electrons that move around and cause all kinds of things to happen, just like
the chemistry club. Yeah. Totally.
I've been really impressed with the community that forms and the support that forms. And I really like, whenever I see pictures of like who's involved in these club activities, it's always a variety of students, a variety of class years, freshmen hanging out with seniors. And I just really think that's a really cool thing about clubs, is that it can bring a variety of people together. Whoever wants to get together and do these club activities are the people that are there doing it. And that's really nice to form these bonds beyond just who you're with and working on this class assignments together.
Yeah. Can I tell you a funny thing about the Free Radicals? When we have like spring preview, it's when students come to visit campus and see if they want to be there. And I am always like, whenever I've done it, I've been at the table beside chemistry, and they always have the free radicals kind of come and volunteer. But they do that thing where they shrink the balloons in liquid nitrogen.
Yes.
Oh my God, my nerves get shot. Like, 'cause it's just like these exploding, because after a while the balloons get tired and start popping, and I'm just like talking to people. But like, I have a very intense startle response. So I'm constantly like
jumping
acting
from
like
all these
a bomb
balloons.
has gone off beside me, but it's just a balloon. So I'm always
Yeah,
like,
so what they
those
do
free
is they
radicals.
they have this cool container and a bunch of balloons, and in the container is liquid nitrogen, and then they just put the balloons in, and they put way more than it looks like should be able to fit because they're shrinking because they're so cold. And so they put in tons of balloons, and then they take them out again with these special tongs, and then they start expanding again. And it's amazing how many balloons they take out, and they take them out and they're just flat, wet things, but then they expand back into balloons, and sometimes they pop. So it's
Like
quite fun.
terrorize your neighboring physics professor. So yeah, it works out.
All right, so what are you working on with clubs?
Okay, so here is my thing, is that I would like if it was like the free radicals. And so
Okay.
I think a thing that's been tricky in our department is we're just a bit too small.
Okay.
And I love doing Crafternoon and the Paranormal Physics Society, but I think I kind of hoped it might sort of become a thing.
That carried on
me.
without your
Right, like I
pushing.
would sort of sow the seed, and then it would like become a thing. And the Paranormal Physics Society, because our technician, like, he is the one who does most of the heavy lifting with that, so that's like, he has taken it over. But I kind of had hoped it would become more of a student generated thing. And I've thought a lot about this, and I wonder, is there just a critical mass that you need to have for it to nucleate, like, and
Maybe.
keep growing? Because chemistry, since I've been here, it's just been so consistent. And like, I have one of the officers in my class, and they always make announcements every week, and they're super motivated. And I just wonder, I think a few years ago we had like a human phenomenon in our course who just organized everything and was just this amazing. And she would have like famous physicists' birthday parties all the time. And
Oh,
like,
wow, that's
she
fun.
was just like such a ball of energy and just incredibly gifted at bringing people together. And then when she graduated, it was just like, now there's no, like, it was just a big gap. And then there was someone else who's been very active, but then she graduated, and then it's, so I think, and I just wonder, part of me wonders, is it something inherent about physics, or is it something about just this critical mass, like just not having enough people to kind of coagulate? And it's a shame, because there is a really cool National Student Physics Society, like SPS. And like, I just haven't gotten myself together to fully do all the stuff I need to do, because you can become a chapter. And I wonder, could having a little bit of external structure kind of make it better, but I mean, at the moment in particular, I haven't had the energy to kind of push that along. But I've thought a little bit about, like, is it just, and I think the other thing that my other grumble is, is like, our major is really hard on students in terms of units and time. And so I wish they had more time to kind of really flourish and explore some of these clubs. Do you know what I mean? And like, when I went to that Dia de los Muertos event, it was just so cool. And those students who were involved in that just seemed so invested and connected to what they had created. And I think I would wish, I think physics might have the highest number of units required to graduate on campus. And so I just wonder, and obviously all of the stuff we teach is really important and crucial, and I couldn't point to anything to take out, but I wonder what we're taking away in terms of that university experience and getting to kind of really, really connect with clubs. So I think we have a little bit of like, we have just great, wonderful students. I love the students we have at our university. But I wonder, in physics, maybe the combination of the unit load and then just the really small student body numbers we just haven't quite had it catch fire and kind of take off,
Totally.
So, yeah.
Well, I'm all in favor of fewer requirements and letting students take more choices, but that's a big discussion. As far as this class goes, or this club goes, I wonder, I mean, of course, the students are super busy, but I kind of feel like there's time for them to they must be doing fun things too, you know?
Right.
And so I wonder, I'm not necessarily convinced that because they're full academically to the brim, they don't have time for a club, you know?
Totally.
So, but I like
they show up to stuff.
They show up, exactly. So yeah.
Like,
and I wonder, like you were talking about having more structure, and I know one thing that the chemistry club does is they have a whole bunch of officer positions, and I don't know exactly how clear the roles of each one of those positions are, but I think they're pretty clear. And then at the end of each year, they elect people for the next year, and I just wonder if maybe having an election and like some clear people who are in charge of certain things, like maybe just 3, you know, like a president or like somebody. One thing that a club I was involved in undergrad myself did was we had like somebody who was in charge of social things and somebody who was in charge of like other kinds of events. You could like split up the tasks. Anyway, I don't know if that'd be helpful, but I wonder if a little structure like that. And then you could have, you know, the outgoing president give some guidance to the incoming president, and then maybe lovely. It'd be a little bit, you know, like
handing over.
So,
yeah, and I
just
think
a thought. Yeah.
And I think that was much more in place when that woman was running everything. She had it like, and I think that was maybe that's a really important key.
Yeah.
Too. So
yeah. I mean, I totally get what you're saying. Like, you don't want it to all be on you to plan everything and make everything happen.
But I wonder if I reflect back on my you have to spend money to make money thing. Like,
right.
Is it like you have to spend money to save energy later on? And like,
yes, maybe if you put in a little bit into making it a self-sustaining thing, and then you just come back periodically to push it along and keep it self-sustaining.
Yeah.
I wonder if you could. I mean, I'm saying all this as somebody who's not involved with clubs, but I think.
Well, I mean, but, you know, I think, like, I'm sort of, like, I want to be, and then I'm sort of grumbling about it, so maybe.
Totally.
Yeah. But tell me, what are you working on?
Well, I'm comfortable with my minimal involvement role in the club, but I really love the club. And I guess one thing I was wondering, how can I support it from afar, you know? And so one thing I was just thinking about was telling the chemistry club whenever an opportunity or something comes up.
Oh,
you know, I
nice.
already, like if a seminar comes or a internship opportunity comes up, I usually forward it to my students in my class and my research students, but I don't currently have in my mental list of people to forward it to the chemistry club, and I feel like I should just add that. I should tell them too. And I think that, you know, we've kind of talked about before, if you send a mass email to the whole department, it doesn't have much feeling, and students might think, oh, this wasn't meant for me. But if you send it directly to them, I think that has some more meaning. And so I feel like if I send it directly to the chemistry club, it would reach a broader group of people, but still have that direct meaning. So anyway, just thinking about this right now, I decided I'll add them to my list of people.
I love that. And I remember when I was in undergrad, we had something, sorry, losing my voice. We had something called a class rep, and a class rep was voted. And I don't remember interacting with them very much. And I think that they were like really involved with planning social events. But the idea was that if there was any issues in the class, we could go to that person and they would sort of relay that information to the faculty. Is
this like one class, like Chem 451 would have a class rep, or what?
So that's the really weird thing about the way my education was structured, is you went in as like, we were applied physics, the class. And so we took all of our classes together.
So you, the group of students who are going through this series
like
of
year
class.
One.
Got it.
Yeah, so it was kind of, which is good news and bad news. As a lot of people found out, like having a romance with someone in your class in your first year was a bad idea, because that was going to like stay around for 4 years. But so, that got me off my topic. But yeah, so like having a class rep, but I wonder, like that could be really cool to have a liaison person in the committee who you could be like, hey, I think this is really interesting because of this. Can you... So it doesn't just become a mass forwarded email. Like if you were like, this will be interesting to people who are like at this point in their career, you know, or whatever. But that could be cool.
So maybe like, you know, looking at the list of officers in the club, there could be one who has some outreach, or I don't know exactly what the role would be, but one of those people could be the person I forward it to, and then they can distribute it. Yeah, exactly.
Right. Or if they were social media people, I can't even describe what they would do because I don't even know how that works, but maybe they could make an Instagram post or something about whatever you're saying.
Oh, so yeah, that's a great idea.
That's cool. I guess, yeah. I like that a lot. That's cool.
Well, I'm looking forward to when your clubs are back in action so I can come hang out in the cool
Oh, yeah,
spaces.
too. I don't know if you knit, but we can...
I don't, but maybe you can teach me.
Oh, my God. Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
It's a bit controversial, though, because it's not the American way. But
Oh, well, that's okay with me. I'd be glad to learn the Irish way. Is it the Irish way?
It's I think it's like called continental. I don't actually know, but I know that I taught a friend to knit, and then she was knitting on a bus in San Francisco, and someone yelled at her and was like, "That's not the American way." And so it's like, "Oh, I didn't know that." But
that's funny.
Yeah, it's super random, but cool. Okay, clubs. We will hopefully someday we will see each other back at clubs.
I look forward to it.
Okay.
Thanks, Ruth.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Professor Podcast with Ruth and Claire. We're delighted to have you as a listener, and we would love to hear from you. And if you want to email us, our address is contactprofessorpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to hear any of your suggestions for future shows or professor quotes that you might want to share with us, or even just things that have come up for you when you were listening to previous episodes. And if you've been enjoying the podcast, we would love if you would spread the word. So the best way to spread word is by telling people you know if you think they should listen to it, or you can leave us a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.